Well, hello, my name is Lauren Antone, and I'm the Senior Marketing and Events Coordinator here at MAR, as well as the producer of our free webinar series. Our webinar today is The Dangers of Waiving Home Inspections. This webinar will discuss the various hazards in waiving a home inspection. While some home inspection issues may be minor, like basic plumbing repairs, there can be serious issues that can cost significant money to repair or are life safety issues. We will present a series of real-life examples of post-purchase pitfalls experienced by real clients who waived inspections. After our live session, our webinar will be recorded and added to the website at marealtor.com under webinars. If you have any questions throughout this session, please type them in the bottom of your chat box on your screen and we'll hold a Q&A afterward. Our presenters today are Alex Steinberg, Michael Atwell, Jameson Malgeri, and Morgan Cohen. Now over to our presenters.
Okay, well, hello, and thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss this important issue. Our panelists today are all members of ASHI New England. In a nutshell, our chapter was established in 1976 and was one of the two founding chapters of what is now a national organization. Since many of you may not be familiar with the American Society of Home Inspectors, we are America's oldest home inspection organization, and to remain in good standing with ASHI, it requires 4 times the amount of continuing education credits than Massachusetts requires for the state license, and much more than any other home inspector organization. Many of our members join not only because we offer the best inspector education, but also they have the unique opportunity to become ASHI certified, which is an independent verification process recognized as the gold standard in our profession. We also have the huge benefit of learning from our members' experiences, and we regularly contact each other with questions and suggestions. Each of us will present some personal examples of where waiving an inspection went very wrong. We'll also take a second round and talk about typical serious conditions that we routinely find at pre-purchase inspections, regular home inspections. So without any further delay, let me turn this over to Jameson.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jameson Malgeri. I'm the owner of Another Level Home Inspections, and I'm also a director on the board of ASHI New England. So we just wanted to give you guys some of the experiences that we have, and we've been kind of all discussing these recently. So we each have a couple examples to give you. I apologize if you were on an inspection today. I'm sure there's only so much time you could spend listening to inspectors yammer on and on. So we'll try to get through these pretty quicker. So the first inspection that I wanted to reference is one that happened recently where a client waived an inspection, and it was kind of a fixer-upper type situation. So he felt that since the house needed work, that he didn't have to, necessarily get an inspection. Very nice guy. He had kids. He really wanted a certain location, and he felt this was the only way to make his situation work out. So we started going through the house. Everything was very outdated, kind of blast from the past. I'm sure you guys have seen plenty of these types of houses. And we went into the basement, and the only thing that was brand new was a drop ceiling. So as a home inspector, my radar immediately started going crazy, thinking, okay, so why is the one thing that they updated in this house a drop ceiling? So I went over to an area where there was a basement window because there was some of the ceiling exposed. And basically you could see that there was, about an inch thick of wood filler in that area, and it was globbed on with fresh paint. Again, like kitchen not updated, bathrooms not updated. So I asked for permission, since he was now the owner of the property, to remove some ceiling tiles. And every tile I removed, I found termite damage, and lots of it. And basically, the framing was coming apart in my hand, just squeezing it, not using a probe or anything. And the termites were still in there. They were still eating away at the structure. So very sad situation. He had a family, he had kids the same age as mine, and he's now stuck with this home where not only did they not even treat or have old damage, they literally all they did was cover it up. So that was kind of a tough situation for me, since I related to that client. Another example is a situation that I recently ran into. I've actually had a couple houses where I've inspected after the sale, again, just like the last example, where we found vermiculite in the attic. And this situation was, they had just moved in. This client had been putting away all of his Christmas decorations into his attic, and he had a lot of them. We were even talking about it. And basically, as soon as I went up into the attic, I saw that there was vermiculite. And, if he had been informed prior to owning the property, he would have known not to disturb it and to have it tested and dealt with properly. And this was a situation where not only was he not aware of the environmental hazard, but he was actually crawling through it to store his items and disturbing it. And he said, when I told him about the situation, that he was planning on doing a whole bunch of recessed lights the next week. So he said, at least it was a situation where only I did it and I made the decisions, where I didn't expose an electrician to it. So it's just another example of, like, even that in that short window after purchasing the home, that he exposed himself to a health situation. So we see a lot of vermiculite, a lot of these types of situations. So that was a couple recent examples that we both that I had, and I know many other inspectors have had some vermiculite issues. So we're going to kind of circle back to some. I see there's a couple questions about vermiculite and that type of thing. We're going to circle back as we go through some pictures, and we can talk about more about answering those questions, that type of thing. But at this point, I'm going to pass it over to, I believe Alex is next, and he's going to go through his stories. But thank
Good
you for the
afternoon. I'm Alex
opportunity.
Steinberg from JBS Home Inspections. I've been a home inspector in the greater Boston area for about 20 years. I'm currently the president of ASHI New England and work with all four of these wonderful guys. A couple examples that I wanted to bring up are, I actually put this on my social media not so long ago, and there was a house that I was doing an inspection for again after the sale. And my antenna went off because there was a chimney that was cut off, and I could see a patch in the roof. And then my assumption always at that point is that there's not going to be anything venting into it from the basement or the first floor or anywhere in the house. And when we got down to the basement, it turns out that there was a water heater that was still live and venting into the chimney, and it was cut off at the roof. So the water heater was basically then venting through the chimney structure, seeping through the chimney structure and getting into the house. This was just a couple of weeks ago, and the water heater was dated 2020. So the plumber who put it in obviously didn't think to look at the top of the house to see if the chimney was still going through the roof. The person who cut the chimney off didn't think to look in the basement to see if anything was venting into it. And that's a significant life safety issue where someone, depending on how cleanly the water heater is burning, someone may have a real problem with carbon monoxide there. The seller spent a ton of time on the Cape and lived in this place very, very little prior to the sale. So that's probably why nothing, dire happened to the person, who was there. So that's an example of, a time where you could have a young family, you could have anyone move into that house, not know about it, and live there. And, I don't mean to be overly, pile on too much, but someone could have died there in that scenario. And the ironic thing is, another home inspector in ASHI New England, she had sent me a bunch of pictures about 3 weeks prior to this of the exact same thing, different town, but the exact same scenario: chimney cut off at the roof and a water heater still going into it. Another example I have is this is about a couple years ago, actually, when this waiving of home inspection sort of first started in my experience. And there was a child daycare at a single family home on the first floor, and the people buying it were interested in continuing having a child daycare there. And the water main coming into the property was lead. And it was a little bit buried. I'm sure you've all seen the water mains when they come in, they're sometimes buried in the front of the basement, frequently sort of in the ground. And when you pulled it away and scratched at the surface of the pipe, it was soft and obvious as anything that it was a lead main. So, and that was, you know, I don't know if the kids brought their water or not, but nonetheless, it was a daycare, you know, significantly another sort of life safety thing. So we'll circle back after this about sort of our thoughts about, you know, sort of what's happening now. And if you have to waive your home inspection, it's really, really critical to have one at some point, just for financial and safety reasons. But those are my examples at this point. So I'm going to give it up to Morgan. Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Morgan Cohen, and I'm owner of MKC Associates Home Inspection and an ASHI education director. So, I've been inspecting in Massachusetts since 2005, and had a couple of interesting examples to share with you guys. Just yesterday, I was inspecting a home that was post-purchase, so the buyers had not gotten an inspection, bought the home, and in the back of the home, this was on a hill. There was a large deck, about 18, 20 feet up off of the ground. And this deck was just structurally unsound. It was swaying when walked. It was improperly constructed to begin with. And had they had a housewarming party, this deck very easily could have ripped off the building. So we're talking about life safety issues. We're also talking about high cost issues. So they go hand in hand in some ways, and life safety, of course, is the most important. But these are real experiences that people have, and then they have to rebuild this deck, which is a high cost item, but also at least now they know, since they did get a home inspection after purchase, that it's just a life safety situation. We've also had two cases of inspectors who've inspected homes post-purchase where both of these houses had gleaming brand new electric panels, and come to find out there's knob and tube wire all through walls and ceilings. And one house was a $65,000 rewiring. The other house was $28,000 rewiring. So, it's like the panels looked so nice because they were brand new. And once they do the inspection, that's where the inspector can find that knob and tube wire. I'm going to hand it over to Mike.
Okay, thank you, Morgan. So in terms of waiving inspections, two stories come to mind. A client had me come out there, and I got there a little early to this inspection. So I was walking around the outside, and I strolled to the back of the property. And at the back of the property, running the whole length of the backyard, was a retaining wall, which was a little over 7 feet high, but it was made out of plastic, and it was leaning, and it was bowed. And I called up the manufacturer on the spot. I could see him, the name of it on the side post. And he said it was rated for a maximum of 4 feet and that it was totally inappropriate for that use. So my client called, got some estimates for replacing that, and they came in at $60,000 because a wall that high, you have to excavate a lot of land away from it to get the weight off the wall, and then have to put in a proper retaining wall to hold up that much soil. So very expensive. It was a difficult yard to access with trees, etc. So yeah, he was stuck with I mean, it's not something he had to do next week, but someday that was going to fall, and it was going to be a very big bill. So I think at a lot of times when people are at the open house or they're making an offer, do they stroll to the far end of the property and look at everything from, all around the backyard? Probably not. They do a quick walkthrough. I've had clients who they've been in the house for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and they make an offer. They don't get a chance to really see those things. So that was one. Another one, bringing up Jameson's comment about having radar. We do sometimes have to infer things from things we see that there might be some other condition there. And one of those is I came into a basement one time, same thing, waived the inspection, and there were plug-in air fresheners in the basement, and there was a new rug on the floor. So I know some people like air fresheners, but in my experience, sometimes those are being used to cover up smells. So my first thought was mold in the basement and a new carpet. But then I started getting I looked over and I saw that the oil tank was fairly new. So I lifted up the carpet, and sure enough, I put my nose down to the concrete and fuel oil. So what had happened is this tank had failed. They had a big leak. It had gotten down through the concrete, and their solution to get out of to sell this house and get out of that was to plug in some air fresheners and put a carpet down. So, but other people had been walking through the house and never noticed any of that because the overwhelming smell was the plug-in air fresheners. So that's two stories for now. And let me pass it over to Jameson. Am I right? Oh, so the other thing we're going to talk about is some life safety issues, the kind of things that we find at inspections routinely that are life safety issues, just to impress the idea that these inspections are important for people. So we're going to each tell a couple of stories about those things that we come across. So Jameson?
Yeah, so we all kind of thought about where we see a lot of life safety issues, and to me, electrical came up right away. And when you make an electrical connection, it doesn't have to just work then. Electricity is vibrating. These connections are vibrating, expanding, contraction. So it's about standing the test of time. So I've seen many panels with melted wires in them, with water getting in them or dripping out of them, with corrosion. Corrosion builds up resistance between connections, so it creates heat. So there's all sorts of bad connections. I'm sure you've dealt with them in the panel, open junction boxes, shock hazards, missing electrical plates in kids' bedrooms. We see electrical services that are right outside a bedroom window where you can reach out and touch the main conductors to the house. We see service entrance cables that are falling off the side of homes, and the wrong connectors are used to hold it to the building, and that's allowing water in. There's just so many life safety issues when it comes to your electrical system, and every single connection in your house is important to kind of look at, evaluate, and make sure that anything you can see looks to be done well.
I'm going to take over now and touch base about some stuff we see all the time in terms of safety things. And the first thing was asbestos. And asbestos, as you all know, comes in many, many forms. It can be in floor tiles, typically 9x9-inch floor tiles. It's often in basements or old hallways, old stairwells, old closets. Frequently, it'll be under a carpet in a basement or under newer tile. Just the other day, I saw some that was under some 12x12-inch, obviously newer tile, and that was sort of pulling off, and under that was the older asbestos tile. There's asbestos, obviously, on heating pipes, and sometimes it's taken off perfectly, and sometimes it's not. And frequently, we can see where the asbestos is not taken off well on steam pipes. It won't be on the straight runs of the piping, but it'll be on the turns, like the elbows and the T's, where they had a different process of putting the asbestos on the pipes. It wasn't sort of a pre-done wrap, but they sort of did it on site. And that's often if a homeowner has taken it off, or if a non-professional has taken it off, that's a place that we can often see residual asbestos. Just today, actually, I was looking at a beautiful house, and there was no more knob and tubing in the house, but there was the classic old fuse panel in the second floor hallway that used to have knob and tubing going into it with a whole bunch of fuses. And those old panels were often lined in asbestos. So where the electrical had been totally upgraded, there was still just a little bit of asbestos there. It wasn't much, so it wouldn't be hard to take care of, but nonetheless, it was still there in the house. Another one is mold that we see all the time. We can have mold in basements, we can have mold in crawl spaces, we can have mold in attics, mold in bathrooms. And so that's something that home inspectors look for daily. And some people don't worry about mold at all, and other people are very, very sensitive to it. So, all depends on the buyer, the client, and what their approach is to that. And then lastly, home inspectors don't do lead paint inspections typically, but certainly if a house is older, we're there to educate our clients about what may or may not be in the house. And it's actually same job today. My clients had a 9-month-old baby, and they were going to go through with this house, but they wanted to know sort of the areas where there might be lead paint. So we talked about doors and windows and trim and that sort of thing where there may be lead. So those are things, sort of life safety things, health things that home inspectors look for on a daily basis. And I'm going to pass it over to Morgan now.
Yeah, some other life safety issues that we are looking for a lot of the time have to do with egress, stairways, access, and other issues like that. We see oftentimes we're going to see bedrooms that are used, bedrooms and basements where there's no egress conforming window, homes where renovations have occurred that removed safe egress or obscured egresses and then were never really restored. Many stairs that don't have adequate handrails or guardrails, many old stairs that are extremely steep or have insufficient height for their guardrails or handrails. And another issue is just in general, homes that have been renovated or added onto without permitting. A lot of times we'll see that. We're not checking permits as part of our home inspection, but our radar goes up when we see the kind of work that looks like it may be improper or done by someone who was not a professional. Oftentimes they won't have a permit pulled, and then there are a lot of implications for that cost-wise, but also from a life safety standpoint. And so we usually point out to we always do, point out to our clients that they need to check that permitting to make sure that any of that work that was done had been permitted. Mike?
Oh, so I realize I never actually introduced myself. I'm Michael Atwell. I am the owner of Jameson Home Inspections. I've been doing inspections for about 25 years, and I am the immediate past president of the chapter. So in terms of life safety, one story jumped out at me. One time I was doing an inspection of a 2-unit apartment building, and on the first floor apartment, there were 3 children under the age of 5, and the youngest was sitting in a high chair at the top of the basement stairs being fed when I came through. At the bottom of the basement stairs, there were the 2 heating plants, 2 furnaces, and one of them had a lot of scorch marks around the flue pipe. So I got out my carbon monoxide detector, and without any exaggeration, it redlined my meter in 5 seconds, and that's 2,000 parts per million of carbon monoxide. To put that in context, workers are allowed to be exposed to 8 parts per million over an 8-hour day. I'm sorry, 50 parts per million over an 8-hour day, and a typical home has about 5 parts per million. So this is like over 2,000. And I'm thinking of this kid right at the top of the stairs. So I immediately called the utility company, and they were there in like 10 minutes, and they shut the thing down. They red tagged it. They turned off the gas. And, you know, I just thought about 3 kids on a cold night when that thing's running. What if it was 100 parts per million on the other side of the basement. So you can imagine what it was upstairs. The other one, talking about gas in general, I've had 3 instances where I suspected that there were leaks in the gas main under people's front lawns. And in each case, the broker called the utility company saying, we think might be a leak here. And they showed up right away. And in each of those inspections, the gas company had the street closed off and were starting to excavate the front yard. They came out, they verified what I suspected, and they were starting excavating the front yard. And the broker's on the phone to the owner saying, you might want to come home. They're digging up your front yard. And so, you know, those are, to me, I think of those as life safety issues. So I'm glad I found those. And, you know, those things wouldn't turn up at a walkthrough. So that's what, you know, I'm impressed with that. You know, we have to, it takes someone who knows their way around to suspect and then verify things like that. So let me see, where are we? Oh, should we go to the photos?
Yeah, we're on to the photos now through Morgan.
Yeah, we've got some photos, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. Some of these photos are going to be of things that we see all the time that are typical, important things, but also they're things that, can everyone see this? I'm assuming people can see this. that there are things that home inspectors have their radar out for. Like we've been talking about that a lot today, but that's because home inspectors bring all of this expertise from thousands of inspections, studying the history of building science and materials histories over the 300 plus years of construction we see here in New England. So there's really a lot that home inspectors are bringing to the table. And here's an example of, this is actually a photo illustration of the exact property that Alex was talking about earlier, where here on the right, you can see the water heater venting into the chimney. And on the left, you can see the section of the roof where the roofing was patched in after the top of the chimney had been removed. So this is what it looks like in actuality. We see a lot of aging water supply piping issues. So on the left, you're seeing a coupling. That's a coupling to extend or connect old piping to inside the house. So that could be old steel piping, most likely, when you see a coupling like that. And on the right, you're seeing that another version of this old steel piping where it's just heavily corroded in the wall. So these are complicated issues to deal with. And when you see that coupling, oftentimes that pipe that goes out from the street to this point is in bad shape. Drain piping, a lot of times this kind of stuff isn't visible if you're not spending time in the home inspection, looking carefully in all of these different locations. In this particular case, this is an inspection I did where the drain pipe, in this photo, you can see it really easily that it's failing so badly, but you really couldn't. I had to, just lean over and climb over stuff to get to this point because I suspected this piping was in bad shape. Structural concerns that we see, on the left, you're seeing a temporary column repair to another makeshift beam reinforcement with joists already falling apart. So they never really approached this from a realistic standpoint. And on the right side, you're seeing roof structure on a flat roof that's racking. The rafters are actually tipping. You also see insulation missing. One of the things that we see a lot of the time is there's one problem, but home inspectors are actually seeing multiple problems at once. And so, in other words, in that case, somebody might, if it was a home buyer only, they might say, oh, there's no insulation up here, but not see that there's a structural problem. We see moisture problems very often in attics. Here you have a bath exhaust fan vent that's venting in and allowing a lot of moisture buildup in that attic. On the right side, you can see, top right, you can see some moisture condensing on nails. Those are roofing nails that are condensing because of weather conditions or other moisture buildup in the attic. And on the bottom right, you're seeing a plumbing vent pipe. So that's going to be sewer gases coming into the attic and moisture issues. Another thing that happens with home inspectors is that they see little tiny clues sometimes, and those little tiny clues can really tip off that there may be a more serious issue. In this photo on the right, on the left, you're seeing that little brown stripe right there is termite mud, and that might be the only place in the entire home where termite evidence is readily visible, and yet you could have damage throughout the exterior wall or in the sill, or extensive damage in other places that you cannot see. On the top right, home inspectors oftentimes know to pull away certain kinds of wood scraps, or in this case, this is a garden edging on the right, to where you're going to typically see termite activity. Move that away, and there they are. On the bottom right, you're seeing a downspout terminating next to the house, and that's another one where someone might say, oh yeah, that's the problem, we got to get that downspout away from the home, but might miss those drill marks that you're seeing in the driveway. Those are actually from a termite treatment. So home inspectors have radar about clues. They also go places that a lot of people don't want to go. And in the home inspection, inspector's gonna crawl into that crawl space. And in these photos, you're seeing two examples of really bad crawl space situations, where on the right, there was so much significant moisture damage that the beam itself was just crushing. And on the left, you're seeing significant termite damage actually on the main beam and the framing up there, but then there's also foundation issues. This is a rubble foundation in really poor condition. We were talking about knob and tube earlier. Alex brought up the asbestos question, and so you can see on the right, this is an example of that asbestos liner that would have been in a what was a fused panel in a home. Then it was later upgraded to this gleaming, nice electrical, but there's the knob and tube still there on the right. So going into this junction box is a knob and tube wire circuit, and then you have these brand new electrical. So it's still there. On the left, you're seeing right in the center, you're seeing a circuit of what's called BX wire, but then right below that, you see a circuit of knob and tube wire. And that one little circuit right there, that might be the only place where knob and tube is actually visible. And home inspectors know where to look, they know what to look for, and their radar is up. If they're good, their radar is up. On the these are some venting issues, some chimney venting issues. On the right, we've got a boiler, an oil-fired boiler that's venting into a clay tile liner. This is underneath a fireplace. So you've got the clay tile liner that's collapsed, and now you're having exhaust. You can actually see the smoke in this picture, the exhaust. And then there's also a water heater venting into the same chamber here. And this little bit right here is actually the ash dump door for the fireplace. So if there was blockage to this flue, you could have exhaust coming out of this ash dump door. On the left, you're seeing something we see very frequently, which is an adjacent liner to the fireplace liner that's visible above the fireplace damper. And a lot of times we'll see this is cracked or there's other problems. Even if it's not cracked, this needs to be dealt with because the chances of a breach are actually pretty high. It doesn't happen too often, but it really can happen. And we've seen it on inspections. And if this is a fireplace flue, it's going to require some expensive relining. If it's an appliance flue, like a boiler flue, it's a little easier. We were talking about vermiculite. Vermiculite sometimes is buried underneath insulations, other insulations. So sometimes an inspector might just see the littlest bit. Or in the case on the right photo, this was an attic that I went into, and it wasn't until I went all the way to the other end of the attic where I could see the vermiculite that was in the wall cavity.
Morgan, there was a question about vermiculite when it came up, and let me just touch base on it really quickly, which is that a lot of vermiculite came from a mine in Libby, Montana that was contaminated with asbestos. So I know that there is still some vermiculite out there. People use it for putting, potting plants in and that sort of stuff. That stuff's okay. But a significant amount of the vermiculite that was used as an insulation came from this one location in Libby, Montana that was problematic and had asbestos in it. There's actually of course, I won't be able to think of the name of it now, but there is a fund that people can tap into where you can have
Zonalite Trust.
Zonalite Trust, right? Thank you, Jameson. Where you can tap into this and get money back for having the vermiculite removed properly. Thanks, and sorry, Morgan.
Yeah, no problem. The Zonalite was a product made by W.R. Grace, and sometimes we even see the bags that say it on it in the attic. We go up into the attic, and there's a couple of bags that just haven't been distributed throughout the attic. But I don't know personally, and maybe you guys can comment on this, if that product was the only product, or if other products came also from Libby. Do you know, Mike, Alex?
I think that was it.
Okay. Some roofing issues. This on the left, on the left, this was a 3-unit building, brand new roof. There was a deck off of the 3rd floor, and I just put my little ladder right up there, climbed up on the roof, and there I could see that this entire roof was completely improperly installed. They ended up having to replace the entire roof. On the right side, this is a photo of what's a stucco, but it's an exterior insulated finish systems building where you're getting this lower roof doesn't have what's called a kick-out flashing at this lower roof joint with the sidewall of the building. And when you see this kind of staining like this on a building like this, there's a very high likelihood that there's significant damage in this whole area, and sometimes it goes even further down. So that's another radar thing. This is a thing where we're looking at that and we can see that there might be significant problems. Here you have a porch that's settled and pulled the sidewall away from the house. On the right, you're seeing a terrible roof install where they actually used foil metal foil duct sealing tape to try to tape up the roof drip edge on here. Underground oil storage tanks. This is something you've probably heard about, if not seen. We've got the 2 lines that come in and then back out to the oil tank. And then on the right, you're seeing the oil fill gauge. So our radar goes up when we certain ages of homes, certain types of homes, oil-fired homes where we can't find any sign of an above-ground tank. And so we'll go look for this. And if we find it, then that's going to help our clients out a huge amount. Exterior siding, signs of leakage or water infiltration or moisture problems. On the left, you're seeing a fungus that's a wood destroying fungus that's growing and feeding on or growing from decaying wood. That's going to tell us that there's some problems inside that siding. On the right, there's some moisture staining that's going to tell us that there's might be ice damming or other vapor problems within the wall. That's all we've got. We could go on and on, but we really wanted to open this up for Q&A because we want to be a resource for you. So let's do that. I'm going to stop sharing and we'll go right back to the regular screen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your stories with us today. If you have any questions, now's the time to write them in your chat box. It looks like we had a couple throughout the presentation. We did cover the vermiculite question. I was kind of looking through here. There was a pretty big one. I guess we'll start with this one first. Some buyers will bring an inspector with them to open houses to do visual inspections. I would never advise or suggest waiving a home inspection, but how much can you really observe in a hurried amount of time? Also, some sellers will have a pre-listing inspection and offer their report to buyers in order to get them to waive their inspection. What are your thoughts about those scenarios?
So I'll take this one. There's a lot of tumult in our industry, within home inspectors about sort of what to do. Many of us have gotten calls to do inspections during an open house, or to do an inspection before offers, or to do sort of an abbreviated broad brush inspection. I think the bottom line is that none of those scenarios will suffice compared to a full home inspection, where we're there for anywhere between 2 and 4 hours, depending on the size of the property. I think that I do some, I call them consultations. I will not do them during an open house. I think that 15 to 20 minutes, you just can't see enough. So some inspectors will insist that they're there for at least an hour, and they talk a lot with their clients about what they're looking at, what they're not looking at, what they can do, what they can't do. But I think the bottom line, and I think the takeaway that we want to give you guys now is that while you can find some stuff, it's the full home inspection and our full process of what we do and what we've done for years, which is how a buyer is going to find out, really what's happening in that home, and really where obvious defects may be, or where the hidden defects may be. And at the same time, we understand that this market is insane right now, and that it is it's crazy. And I feel for buyers out there who have had 7 offers that have all, not been accepted. And so, there's a difference between waiving your home inspection contingency and not doing a home inspection at all. And I guess what we'd love to put out there to you realtors is that if someone is willing to go in and waive their home inspection contingency, then I would really advise them to do a home inspection at some point, whether that's after the purchase and sale, which I think can be a little bit problematic, because I've done some in that scenario and the sellers then freak out because they say, wait a minute, you waive the home inspection contingency and now you want to get someone in there. And I think rightfully so, they get cold feet and they do a lot of pushback. So I think the cleanest time to do it is after closing. And I've done a bunch of those. Obviously, the new homeowner is responsible for anything that we might find, but at least if there's life safety stuff, they'll know about it and they can address it quickly. So that's our take. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything.
Well, another important part of doing the inspection anyway is a lot of times we have people that it's their first time they've owned a home and they literally don't know how anything works. They don't know what the two parts of their air conditioning system are for, or what they do, how often should it be maintained. They don't understand the basics of their waste pipe, their water main, where are the shutoffs in case of an emergency. And these things can be explained, clearly and pretty quickly. And you can just feel the tension in the room melt away when people, when some of these issues get demystified for them. They've just come from an apartment, they have no experience with running a house, and there's a lot of information that we see as part of our job, although technically it's not, where we explain how the systems and the components in the house work and give suggestions for maintenance and things like that. So I think that's a crucial part of getting an inspector in there. Anyone else?
Yeah, and I think, sorry, I don't mean to jump back in, but I think what the four of us were also talking about is a lot of times on these waived home inspections, we see the price point at between 400 and 1.5 million, which is generally the first time home buyers or the younger buyers who really don't know, who are maxing themselves out. So financially, they're putting themselves at, more risk than someone who's buying a, $4 million property, who if they need a new heating system or if they need a new water main and they need to throw 10 to 50 grand at the house, it's easier for them to do that as opposed to someone who's stretching for a $500,000 condo and then finds out that they need to put another 50 grand into it.
Yeah. They've already participated in a bidding war. They probably went higher than they expected to go, and now they have a big bill to look at.
Do you think the preliminary inspections that are taking place during showings and open houses are allowable under the home inspector regulations?
I could answer that. So I attended the last couple board meetings for the licensing. So they are talking about doing some sort of announcement specifically targeting, the 15-minute inspections is what they were referring to them as these quick walkthrough inspections. And they want to do an announcement to let people know that, you should be following the regs during the inspection. That they didn't officially have any stance on it yet, but that was the conversation. One thing that's up in the air as far as if these are allowable right now is our regulations say that the inspection has to be pursuant to the sale of the property to fall within the regs. And it's hasn't been officially taken a stance on by the board of whether like a walkthrough or a consultation is pursuant to the sale. So we're in a bit of a interesting period where our licensing board has talked about it, hasn't taken a full stance on it. And, depending on how long this situation lasts, they may not take an official stance on it until there's a case against them. So the answer to that question is it has not fully been decided if a inspection or a consultation prior to an offer is officially within the regulations or not. But my personal feeling is that the board seems to be leaning that way. So it's kind of a business decision we all make as individuals.
Another wrinkle in those regulations is that it's always been in the regulations that the buyer could limit the inspection. I only want you to look at the electrical and the plumbing and the roof, but that had to be spelled out before the inspection. But most times when people are contacting us for these walkthroughs, they're hoping you're going to find the big issue that might discourage them from making an offer. And they don't know where that lies. It could be in any of those systems. It could be in Morgan's deck, or it could have been anything. So they're being asked to specify how we're limiting the inspection, but they can't. So it puts, if the inspector says, I will only look at these things, well, the major issues might be in 2 other places. So it's all a little complicated.
I think, Mike, you bring up a great point. I mean, and what happens also is that there's a part of the system, you can't waive the heating system because you want to talk about the most important part of the heating system. You don't want to talk about the less important parts of it. So the reality is that we're asking clients to waive certain parts of the inspection if we're doing these consultations, and that actually does fit the regulations. In my experience, what we do is we say essentially anything that I'm not inspecting, you're waiving, because as Mike said, it's really the inspector who's going to walk into that house and really know what to look at. It's not any specific set of limited pieces that are going to always yield the most important parts of the inspection. It's actually more the other way around, where the inspector has to determine that, even though the client has to waive it.
Next question is it less risky to waive newer construction, say 2019 and on?
I can answer that. I think that generally speaking, the amount and frequency of problems that we find in a newer construction building, on average is lower. However, we find life safety issues. We find significant, cost issues. Morgan shared the picture of the roof. That was a new construction roof that was pitched improperly and needs to be rebuilt. We also see, gas leakage, like the gas piping is not fully connected and there's a life safety issue. A brand new building has not stood the test of time. So there's things that, as a home inspector, you can go in and point out that could present a life safety concern or significant cost. So I would say on average, yes, we find less problems in newly constructed homes, but we still find problems. And until you get into the property and inspect it, you don't really know what those problems are going to be.
And some new constructions are just hastily flipped properties where a lot of corners were cut. And I had one a few weeks ago. We turned on the shower on the second floor and water started coming through the first floor bathroom ceiling. They'd never connected the two ends of the pipe. And there were big deck issues. There were mushrooms growing out of the siding. So there was a lot of shoddy workmanship. So I agree with that Jameson, that generally, yes, but there can be a lot of big stuff with new construction as well.
I'm also curious if it's going to get worse because, with plywood costing $25 a board a year ago and $100 now, like what sort of impact is that going to have on a newly constructed home? Like, I would imagine that actually may make certain aspects of the home get.
So those aspects being, for example, roofing is a classic. We see a lot of 80s construction where they use 3/8 inch plywood or OSB on the roof, and we're going to probably start to see people cutting corners in places like that. Yeah.
Have any of you ever been sued for not finding something significant?
Knocking on wood. No.
What did you say, Mike?
I'm knocking on wood. No.
I can answer that. I got sued once for finding something not significant. This was a buyer that actually had a dip in their floor, like literally a very shallow dip in their floor, and they had an attorney send us a 93A letter. So if you don't know what that is, that's a deceptive practices. Chapter 93A is a deceptive practices law. I'm not familiar in the whole law, but an attorney sent us a letter, and we work with our insurance company, so we have to turn that over to our insurance company. We had photos. We had photos of that specific dip in the floor having been covered during the inspection. As it happens, we just had a photo with this dresser was right over it, and then the client actually submitted their renovation construction documents that they had used to describe where the structure issue was And it was that they were actually just doing a renovation and they wanted to support their renovation with additional funds from us. So as it happened, our insurance company tried to fight it, but then they ended up settling in the end because that's what they do. So that's a little story about just a bad situation that wasn't really that bad. It was a minor issue, but we luckily we haven't been sued for anything really significant.
Worth. To tie it into our topic, I think that all of us have found problems that even us as trained professionals who constantly educate ourselves to do this, and this is all we do, have barely found things in the past at some points in our career. They were barely observable. And because we were careful enough and patient enough, we were able to find problems. That happens to us. And we spend a lot of time making sure we don't miss things. So to expect a buyer or an agent to, have the expertise to identify all the issues is just not fair to them. So just to tie the lawsuit thing, there's things where if you're not paying attention, you could expose yourself to that, and nobody's going to notice that in 15 minutes.
I think, Myra, I think maybe your question was more of a global one about, do home inspectors get sued? And the short answer is yes. Home inspectors do get sued. I've been sued a couple times throughout my career. It's a horrible process to go through. So yeah, if we're on a full home inspection and we miss something and we run into the wrong client, then there's certainly a potential that they will come back to us, which is why actually all home inspectors that are licensed in Massachusetts have to carry a minimum amount of errors and omissions insurance.
Sorry, there was one more question. Do you want us to answer it quick?
Sure, go ahead.
It was a question about pre-listing inspections. It says, is a pre-listing inspection for a seller as thorough and handled the same way in as much detail as a buyer inspection? The answer is, for my company, and I'm sure most companies, yes, we want to do a full inspection. We do it the same way that we would do a typical inspection. The only caveat is, oftentimes I will give the seller the ability to have us come back if they decide to, kind of correct some of the issues that come up. They'll have the option for us to come back, re-inspect it. We don't delete the original comment in the report. We actually add to it, as in say there's knob and tube in the building. We'll say, accessible areas where it was noted has been resolved, that type of thing. So it's a little bit different of a process, but for us to be able to offer them, we have to have them be just as comprehensive as our standard inspections, or else they don't really add any value to that seller. And also, there's still many cases where a buyer will still have an inspection after the case. And, if another inspector is finding something that I didn't, that's not a good thing in general. So
I think that having a pre-listing inspection, or as a realtor, as you're putting the house on the market, suggesting to your clients as you're listing the property that maybe they get a home inspection. I know that's the way it's done in some states. I think in California, the sellers get it done before the house goes on the market, and that inspection report is kind of part of the documentation. I think that's an interesting thought and one way around sort of what's happening right now. Thank you.
And you're not shocking the buyer. The buyer doesn't fall in love with the house and then have a grumpy home inspector like Alex come in and tell them all these horrible things. And then, now all of a sudden it seems like the circumstances have changed. They know the problems from the start. So we do see a very smooth process with a pre-sale inspection.
We'd love to see mandatory home inspections. That would be a wonderful thing for home buyers in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I think everybody would be more comfortable. I would imagine the realtors would be more comfortable with that, and so we certainly would be. Maybe there's a possibility of lobbying for something like that. We're a pretty small group, and you're a pretty large group. Maybe through consumer protection, we could come up with some bill, but I think that's the way out. I'm concerned that once the market changes, that what the genie is now out of the bottle with this waiving the inspection, and will it become part of the permanent arsenal that that home buyers and realtors will have in their back pockets? So I hope not, but having mandatory home inspections, I think, would make everyone involved happier and safer.
It looks like that's all the questions that we have for today. So as a reminder to everyone, this webinar has been recorded and will be available to view in the next few days on our website at marealtor.com. You'll find it under webinars, and you can find any upcoming webinars on that page as well. So thank you so much to Alex, Michael, Jameson, and Morgan for your presentation, and thank you for everyone for joining today.
I just wanted to say thank you again for the opportunity. You know, I think this is a really important topic, and I know everyone at ASHI New England is super appreciative to know that you guys are interested in this information, and we're very happy to talk with you guys today.
We're so happy to have you all. Thank you
Thanks.
for joining us.
Thank you.
And,
Let's keep the lines open.
yeah, we're all four of us to be, I know I'm speaking for the other three folks here. We're all available for any questions anyone has anytime. So just feel free to contact any of us with any questions.
All right. Well, thank you all. And
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
next time.